Chocolate cake is warm, fudgy, death by chocolate, sugary, indulgent. Chocolate cake is what I make to create a special occasion out of any moment. It's elementary. Today I'm going to show you our classic easy chocolate cake. This has a really moist chocolatey crumb with a classic American chocolate buttercream. Then we're going to move into our flourless chocolate meringue cake. It'll be really rich and fudgy with a nice marshmallowy, crunchy meringue topping. And last but not least, the molten chocolate lava cake. Ooey gooey, just warm, melt in your mouth situation, all the things that you want. Once you master all of these recipes, you will know what makes chocolate cake chocolate cake. So we're going to make our classic easy chocolate cake. It's easy for a number of reasons. First of all, it only takes 2 bowls. It's going to have ingredients you most likely already have on hand. We're going to mix our dry, mix our wet, combine it. It's going in the oven. I'm going to start with flour. So there's 2 kinds of cocoa powder. There's a natural unsweetened cocoa powder, and then there's Dutch process. So a natural is more acidic, whereas the Dutch process is more of a mellow flavor. You can use it with baking powder, or you can use it with a combination of baking soda and baking powder. We're using Dutch process today. Sugar. I like granulated versus using a combination of brown and granulated here because it really gives that loftiness and that rise to the cake. Salt. Salt is good because obviously flavor, it balances out those sweeter notes. We have baking powder and baking soda. The reason we're using both baking powder and baking soda here is because there's a lot of ingredients in this and it can really weigh down the cake, and so using both really helps with that rise. All right, so I'm gonna whisk it together. This will help get out a lot of those clumps. So my dry ingredients are all nicely whisked together and combined. Now we're going to combine all of our wet ingredients. So I'm gonna start out, I have 2 eggs. In this recipe, we are using oil versus butter. Oil is lighter than butter, so it will create a loftier cake, and it keeps the cake moist for a lot longer. So then we're gonna add some milk, we're gonna add some vanilla. I've mentioned in the past, I love almond extract. So you could add some almond extract or amaretto. Something else that I love with chocolate is some citrus zest, like blood orange or some cara zest in there. So good. So I'm gonna whisk together what we have so far. I boiled some water. We're gonna temper it slowly into our eggs. Nicely as I pour it in. It creates this really nice smooth batter that really creates that nice even bake in the end. So a lot of people think that you need to put the dry into the wet versus the wet into the dry. That part really doesn't matter. The thing that you really want to make sure that you do is you mix them separately before bringing them together. So from here, we're going to pour our wet into the dry. So we're just going to slowly mix everything together. We want a nice homogeneous fluid batter, no clumps. We did it. It's all mixed. What I have here is just 2 8-inch rounds. I just sprayed them. You can flour them. And then I used parchment rounds to put in the bottom here for some easy extraction in the end. We're just gonna eyeball these to get them as level as we can. So we're just gonna go a little at a time. So you see that nice fluid batter. That's what we're talking about. All the ratios are nice and even. So these feel pretty even to me. I'm gonna tap them a little bit. This will get some of the air bubbles out, so that way there's not pockets of air some places and not other places, and really helps for that even rise. We're gonna pop these into a 350-degree oven. They're gonna bake for about 30-35 minutes. They came out of the oven clean. They cooled for about 15 minutes. I popped them out of their pan. They might be a little uneven. One might be a little bit higher than the other one, but they also are kind of domed slightly, so I wanna even them off before I layer them. And I'm just gonna go a little bit in, and then as I go a little bit in, I'm gonna keep turning the turntable. And make sure your hand is on top of the cake. You don't wanna get close to that serrated knife. It's pretty level. So I'm gonna level off this one, and then we'll get to decorating. I've whipped up some nice American buttercream. There's cocoa powder in there to really bring out that chocolate flavor. You can kind of put as much or as little buttercream as you want in the middle here. Yeah, so we just want to level this buttercream out so that this next layer lays nice and flat. And then I like to put that open crumb that I cut off, I like to put that face down on top. So now we're just gonna plop on some buttercream. And from here, it's kind of like up to you. It's totally okay that some of this buttercream is coming out the sides because this initial coat is kind of to lock in. It's called the crumb coat. We're gonna lock in exactly what it says, all of those crumbs. I also have a smaller offset spatula. You can do that nice like Instagram-y, swirly-dirly motions. I could fill a piping bag. I could do a border. I mean, honestly, when it comes to decorating a cake, sky is the limit. It's your cake, it's elementary. All right, our cake is ready. It is fully frosted. It has come out of the fridge. I let it come back to room temperature. One thing I like to do when I'm cutting into a cake is I like to run my knife under warm water. Just gonna wipe it off. I don't want that moisture to hold on to the cake or the buttercream itself. This really helps in terms of creating a clean cut. Big moment. It's super fudgy, but it's not to the point where like, I can only have one bite or only one slice. I could definitely do some work on this. You still get all of that depth of flavor from the cocoa powder. You get that nice springy texture in the cake as well. It is the slice of cake I want, no matter what emotion I'm feeling. It is just a comfort hug in a bite. Now we're gonna make a flourless meringue chocolate cake. I love this flourless chocolate meringue cake because it has all that textural bliss to it. So you get some crunchy, you get some marshmallowy, and it's just all the things going on. So we're going to start by melting the chocolate. I'm using in this recipe a combination of chocolate and cocoa powder. So why wouldn't we just use cocoa powder? Well, in this recipe, the chocolate is also helping with the structure of it. And then the cocoa powder is coming in to also help really just drive that chocolate flavor home. So I found that a combination of both really helps just make this cake stand out from all the other ones. And then I'm going to pour some hot coffee over top. Those coffee notes will really serve to heighten the richness and almost elevate that bitterness that is in the chocolate itself. So we're just gonna melt these together, get them silky smooth and luscious. And we are there. We'll move on to our other ingredients. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and add my cocoa powder to this. Because it's warm, it will help bloom the cocoa powder along with the chocolate itself. Blooming is when you use heat to really activate all that flavor. I'll go ahead and add my oil. So I'm using olive oil versus a neutral oil because I love the deep flavor of olive oil. So we're just slowly incorporating everything together. With the addition of the oil, that'll bring down the temperature enough that I can go ahead and add my eggs to the chocolate. I'm just adding some yolks. We'll get to the whites later. This is a much higher ratio of eggs in this recipe, but there's no flour. So all of that structure from this cake is coming from the eggs. Now we're gonna add our sugar. I really like the brown sugar because it adds a little bit of moisture to it from that molasses and it gives kind of like this caramelly depth of flavor. I have a combination of brown sugar and granulated. So we just want it nice and combined. I'm gonna add some vanilla and some salt. Just until combined. We're not really looking for anything in particular here. All right, so I'm gonna leave that. You're using 5 eggs total in this recipe, but you're separating them from the get-go. So the egg yolks are in here, and I have the egg whites. I'm going to whip up the egg whites until they're nice, almost tripled in volume. It's about like 5 minutes. You're whipping at high speed. All right, you just really want this nice, foamy airiness to the egg whites. So from here, I'm going to fold my egg whites into my batter. I'm going to take about 1/3 from the beginning to really start working it into it. So it is a thicker batter that you're folding these egg whites into. So now I'm gonna just add the rest of them in. So I'm just mixing this until I really can't see any egg white and it looks about the same color, texture throughout. So when we're talking about ratios, you can really see that in the batter. That first one is that nice silky smooth batter where it's a 1:1 to 1 to 1. And this one has no flour. So it's 0 with flour, 1 for sugar, and then about a 4 to fat. So you'll end up with this kind of moussey texture in the end for this batter. So I'm just gonna transfer the batter. I'm gonna pop it into a 350-degree oven for about 25 minutes. Then we're gonna add the meringue, bake for about another 30 minutes. But this is just so the batter can get a head start and make sure that that cake is fully cooked by the time the meringue is cooked. So meringue is essentially whipped up egg whites that are cooked to some degree. So to get this started, we're gonna whip our egg whites up until they're a little bit frothy. It is at that frothy stage that I mentioned, I'm gonna turn it to like a medium low and gradually pour in the sugar. So I'm also going to pop in some cream of tartar. Oh yeah, blizzard test. Yeah, this is perfect. So at this stage, I'm gonna put in some cocoa powder, just a small amount. So we're just gonna mix this just until it's combined and a nice even color. So you're going for that same effect of you just want it to all flow up into your eyes. All right, now I'm just gonna kind of fold in the rest of that around the edges. So at this point, I'm gonna add some hazelnuts. I have toasted and chopped these up. So you can really smell the aroma of the toasted hazelnuts. It reminds me of like an Italian bakery. It's just rich. It smells almost like a freshly baked waffle cone. It's delicious. We're done with the meringue topping. I'm gonna take out the flourless cake. We're gonna smooth it on top and then pop it back in the oven. So in this initial bake, you're not checking for doneness really, but you can see around the edges of the cake, it's set, and then it'll have a liquidy center. I'm gonna kind of plop it all over because it will just help in terms of smoothing it out. The cake is jiggly in the center, so I'm not trying to disrupt the cake or like push it down into the cake. So I'm being a little gentle in that regard. And then you can do kind of like some swirly action. All right, so we're gonna pop this back in the oven. This point, we're looking for the meringue to puff up. It'll be dried to the touch. It might be a little bit brown. So 350 for about 30 minutes. All right, so this is our flourless chocolate meringue cake. Look at that hat. I mean, who wouldn't want that? It's such a stunner compared to the easy chocolate cake where we had to then level it off, stack it, frost it with buttercream, do all that shebang. As soon as this comes out of the oven, it's done. We're not touching it. I don't have to put any more decoration on this. It stands on its own. I took it out of the springform pan. We just need to slice it and eat it. You can feel the nice crunchy exterior of the meringue, but it's still this nice pillowy softness, almost that like marshmallowiness. And you can see the hazelnuts as well. It's just like the ultimate brownie with this nice crunchy topping almost. Unlike the classic chocolate cake, you're not really getting those really airy crumbs to it. It is very rich, but it's so delicious. And I really enjoy that crunch from the hazelnut, that crunch from the meringue, and it's just like all of this texture going on in my mouth. This is the winner for me. Now we are making lava cake. So we mentioned ratio and structure in the past. Our hero cake had a 1:1:1:1:1:1, very even balance of all of the ingredients. Our flourless cake had a higher ratio difference between the sugar and the fats. There was no flour at all. This one has a closer ratio of the sugar to fat, and there's just a little bit flour to just give it that structure that we want. I'm gonna get the chocolate going, and then we're gonna have a little history lesson real quick on the lava cake. Like we did the flourless meringue cake, I'm just gonna melt down some chocolate. I'm using a semi-sweet or a dark chocolate. I'm going to melt this down again on a double boiler with butter. This is creating that ganache to really hold up the structure. So there's no cocoa powder in this recipe except for when we get to it, I dust my ramekins with cocoa powder. So while it's melting down, let's talk about the history of lava cake. In the early 1980s, there was a French chef, Michael Braz, that did this ganache method. He wanted to make a cake that tasted like a warm cup of hot chocolate. So he did that by making a cake and then having a ganache sphere that he set in the middle of it. And so when the cake baked up, that chocolate melted, that chocolate ganache melted and created that oozy center. Years later, our own New York John George, he was making like 500 cakes for a big dinner event. He put all of them in the oven at the same time, and when they came out and he served them, he realized that all of them were underbaked. So it was a complete accident, and he was horrified, like most of us would be, but everyone loved it. Standing ovation all the way around, and so that became the second version of this lava cake. So it is completely safe to eat. This is just a second method. All right, my chocolate and my butter are completely melted down. So to start, we're gonna have 2 whole eggs and then 2 egg yolks. We're gonna go ahead and put in our sugar and then just about a pinch of salt, to even out that flavor. So I'm gonna use an electric hand mixer. You can use a stand mixer if you want, whatever you have on hand, but I wanna get it to the point where it's almost tripled in volume. Nice and luscious. So now that I've whipped up my eggs and my sugar, I'm going to add my chocolate. All right, I'm just gonna fold this a couple times because we'll continue to mix it together when we add the flour, but I just wanna give it a good go ahead. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and add my flour. I'm just gonna kind of sprinkle it over top. Back to folding. This is the only kind of folding that I like. I'm just doing it a couple more times to make sure I don't have any flour pockets and that any of the chocolate from the bottom is folded in. Glass bowl, I can also do a little check. So I dusted my ramekins with cocoa powder. You could probably make about 5 4-ounce ramekins, but I'm gonna pour it into 4. So in terms of batter, our easy chocolate cake was that really silky smooth batter. Our flourless meringue cake was more of a moussey texture. And this is kind of leans in close to the moussiness, but it's more of like a pudding. So I've poured in the batter about up to that bottom lip of the ramekin. So I'm gonna put it in this high temperature oven of 450 for about 10 minutes. That high temperature oven really creates that outer seal of the cake to really lock in all that ooey gooiness that we want. So our lava cakes are out of the oven. I want this nice kind of crisp top to them. I also temp them because I want them to reach 160. That means the eggs are cooked through, and because it is underbaked, it is now safe to eat. So I let them cool for about 4 to 5 minutes. I'm gonna run an offset around the sides to help with that release. You wanna be a little bit gentle because again, it's underbaked. It does not have the complete structure as a normal cake. And then we'll go ahead and invert them. Last one. Let them sit for 1 minute upside down, and then we'll do the unveiling. The lava cakes are definitely the most intimidating recipe. Oh, look at that gooey center. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's exactly what you want in a lava cake. You want that flow, that lava flow of all that chocolate. You get that cakiness, like that moist crumb of our easy chocolate cake, but then you get that rich kind of fudgy, but still gooey center, kind of similar to the flourless, but all of that goo that you want in a molten lava cake. If you want that death by chocolate experience, this is it. Today, we talked all things chocolate cake. We made our classic easy chocolate cake, our flourless chocolate meringue cake, chocolate molten lava cake. We talked about ratios of flour to sugar to fat. We talked about what makes that really moist crumb in this cake. Once you master all of these little things, you will know what makes chocolate cake chocolate cake. Yeah! Let me know in the comments below what chocolate cake is your favorite, and make sure to subscribe to the Spruce Eats.